I did actually forget one thing. One of the reasons that you do cultivation or digging and plowing is to knock down weeds, control weeds. Well, that's a bit of a myth. Knock them down, stir them up, and up they come again. Every time you agitate the soil, you add air and sunlight to the soil, you will trigger seeds in the seed bank, the weed seed bank, that will germinate. So in season, we are out weeding somewhat vigilantly. Okay, so we delineated the bed, and then we'll usually come and edge the string edge of the bed here. Why don't you guys demonstrate? You want to make sure your cut is straight up and down. It doesn't cant in like this, because you're going to have a row of plants right out here on the edge as well as in the interior. You would like the conditions here, the depth of penetration, to be the same as the center. There's an old phrase that we've used around here for a long time on everything. It's a flat in the greenhouse, a bed in the garden, a field. Pay attention to the corners and the edges. The middle takes care of itself. There's always, you're covered in the middle, but you want to be more fastidious about your cultivation, your addition of compost, the depth of penetration, etc. on the edges. So this up and down perpendicular cut just delineates the edge of the bed. Okay. Let's apply compost. We have a formula at the present time that we're using where we use 2 of these 5-foot cubic wheelbarrows of compost per full length of bed. And it actually is kind of a skill to evenly put 2 wheelbarrows evenly on a 40-something foot run like that. But you see the way they're doing it is they're trying to move again, the corners and edges thing, the evenness principle. You want every spot in that bed to be about equally covered with compost. So it's, I often will joke around and say, you don't do this. Well, you actually could figure out a way to do that and be pretty accurate. It's just literally you're being as even as you can in your distribution. Sometimes, again, to reinforce that corners and edges thing, then I'll come at the end after I've done that, and I'll make a pass down the edge of the bed like this, just to make sure I've got that edge covered. The amount of compost to apply. Generally, the recommendation is about 1/2 pound to 2 pounds of compost. Oh, look at that. This is Pavlovian. Everybody's writing. Must have said something significant. 1/2 pound to 2 pounds of compost per square foot. Now, that's quite a range. The better your soil is, the less you need to put on. The more poor your soil is, and the more you're in the early developmental stages, the more you would put on. That's a good general recommendation for most soils. It translates in this instance to, in a 40-something foot run, about 2 5-foot cubic wheelbarrows of compost. So you apply compost prior to digging the bed, and then you open up a trench. We've already done this because we find that gardening is a spectator sport, a little boring. So you open up a U trench. It's slightly wider and about as deep as your spade. Why don't you just U it up so it looks just like the textbook, folks? And this is a trench. You take, pretend this, we're doing this here, but pretend this was the top of the bed. You take the soil from your first trench and you put it aside, as Ryan is, in a wheelbarrow. That will be used to fill the last trench that you open at the bottom of the bed. And then we're going to demonstrate double digging. So these guys are going to jump down, even though only one of them is a guy, are going to jump down into the bottom of the trench after Susie puts a little, you're layering a little compost at depth, a couple shovelfuls in the bottom of the trench. And then you can use a spade or a fork and you just jump in there and penetrate another depth. I'm going to actually, yeah.
Much better.
It's a managerial prerogative here. You start in the center and you penetrate another spade's depth, and you're just loosely levering this up. It's a rough working. If you have an impenetrable clay layer, this will probably do the trick. As you can see in this instance, we don't really have that. But you're just fracturing that second depth. And this is a good technique to use if you need to deepen your soil. You're going down with the tines and breaking it up, and the compost that you put in the bottom of the trench sifts down through the fractures from your tines, so you're just opening that soil at depth. And that's the double part of double digging. And then you jump back up on the bed, and there are a bunch of synonyms for this style of digging. Some people call it slide digging. You're just levering or sliding the soil forward, and it's a little rough at first, but you're essentially filling the trench that you opened. We've just done this thing here now. We create community by having two people dig side by side, but you could do it yourself. And then Susie's got this cool kick it thing. I love it. So why don't you guys dig on a little bit? If they were double digging, they would stop every time they opened a new trench, lay a little compost into the bottom, fracture that second depth. They're now doing what's called single digging. You open a trench, and you simply lever the soil forward. On this slope, with this insanely chocolate-caked soil, the trenches never stay open. You see in the text the perfect U trench. That would mean you have the most wicked adobe clay. But it's just levering that soil forward, and you can see what they're doing. This is primary cultivation or rough digging. You're not concerned about rough. That's what it is. It's rough digging. We're going to get here in a minute with our secondary cultivation, the use of the tilting fork, breaking up these clods, raking it off like that, and be ready to accept seeds or seedlings. But you can see by the raised nature of these two sections, we're adding a considerable amount of air to the volume of the soil. And again, this is positive in the sense that it makes it easy for roots to move through, good channels. It's good because it stimulates microbial life, which breaks down organic matter, renders it up as plant food. But if you're doing this all the time, you're burning your soil out. If you're doing all this time, again, without sufficient organic matter inputs, either through green manures that rot down and then are planted into, or the addition of finished compost, you can burn your soil out. Too much cultivation will break down aggregates and destroy structure. But working on a garden scale is much more gentle than working on a mechanized scale. So you have a little more latitude there.